All right, Dave McCutcheon, thanks for coming in.
No worries.
Emergency physician at Royal Perth, old Scotch College, and your name's on the wall down there as Ducks of Scotch in 1996. A man with an interesting job, some interesting hobbies, and an interesting mo. Shall we start with the mo?
Yeah, okay. So I don't normally have a bad moustache like this, but because they're in the middle of the COVID pandemic, obviously, we have to wear special masks at work, which prohibit kind of most facial hair. And so we were given a range of options of what is acceptable of basically different bad moustaches. And so
So is it what we're seeing on the news, like you've got multiple layers of protective gear, or is it just a mask?
Yeah, there's a few different layers of things, but basically it's a mask that seals around your nose and sort of under your chin as well, which has to be airtight. So it's pretty tight, and I've got quite a pointy nose, so I get a really sore nose at the end of a shift from having it on.
Yeah.
But you can't have any hair sort of where it's supposed to seal is the issue, so hence the bad moustache. I normally have a beard, so apologies to anyone that's actually watching this. Hopefully it's an audio-only podcast.
Is it a long shift? Like, how does it hurt after wearing all that stuff for that amount of time?
Yeah, the way we've set up the emergency department, we have a special area where we see any patient that could potentially have COVID that's got a fever or sore throat or runny nose or cough or anything like that. They all go to a separate section, and we're dressed in that special equipment for maximum 4 hours at a time, and then we'll swap out and have a break and go back in again. The theory is your mask gets a little bit less effective after you've worn it for a while, because it gets a bit wet with the air you breathe out, etc. So
how does that work? You get, like, germs can transfer through moisture more readily or something?
Germs they can survive for longer if it's a moist environment, and droplets can collect on the outside of your mask, and potentially after a while your mask becomes permeable more so than previously. All
right, well, we're going to talk heaps about the medical side of things, I'm sure, but just to start off with, do you have fond memories of Scotch? What are some of the things you recall? We've seen your photo in a couple of those books.
Yeah, they're pretty grainy photos now. Yeah, look, I had a great time here. I was very lucky to come to this school, I think is the main take home. I really liked the music that was available here, so I was in the concert band and the orchestra and played the trumpet when I was here as the main instrument, and sort of a few other different brass instruments. So I really enjoyed that side of things, and also the sport I really liked as well. So I did swimming and played soccer and a bit of tennis and water polo and a few other things. But I think to have that built into the school as well, and to be able to stay fit and exercise along with all the other stuff you do at school is really important, I think. So I think I've got a lot out of that.
Full range. So, I mean, we're talking about the range project here, and I don't know if you've heard that term range, but it's talking about being exposed to many different disciplines and, being capable in things like music and sport and different silos of education as well. Did that benefit you at Scotch, do you think? And what did benefit you?
Well, I really liked sort of the early years we just had high school back then, which started in year 8. And the early years, you got to do a whole lot of different things. So I got to do woodwork and metalwork, and I can't remember all the different...
Drama, media, computing, probably tech drawing
drama
as well.
And art and tech drawing. And you got to taste all of these things, which I found really, really interesting. And then I was quite sort of almost sad that I had to really narrow it down to just a few subjects, and the further you went through, the more narrow you had to become. And I found that, I would have liked to keep doing all those fun things as well. I loved doing metalwork. It was really fun.
Yeah, I think we really speak the benefits of delayed specialisation, just from our own personal experience, as well as kind of what some of the research says. Could you do music all the way through high school?
So no, I kept doing, I didn't do music as a subject itself. I just did the instrumental lessons. I also learnt the drums at school as well. And then I was in the various ensembles. So we had a jazz band, and we had a concert band and orchestra. So I was in all of those, which rehearsed before school.
That sounds pretty hectic time-wise, and I guess what would you say to boys that are studying now that may be trying to reduce their load? So you were doing 6 TE subjects. What were those?
I did 2 maths subjects and physics and chemistry and English literature and French. were mine.
Right.
And I didn't want to do economics.
Right.
Sorry to the economics teacher, whoever that is.
Oops.
So can I ask, what memories stand out for you from that, particularly that music program, in terms of the people that were running it? Do you remember any pivotal music teachers that you had? And what are your kind of fondest memories of that program?
Yeah, I think I disappointed them a little bit. I remember Tim was the trumpet teacher. I can't remember his surname. Is he still here, Tim?
Mr. Simpson?
Simpson, yeah, Tim Simpson. Yeah.
Yes.
So he was
the great man.
Really nice guy. He was the trumpet teacher, and he sort of took some of the bands as well. And I kind of frustrated him because I kept changing between different brass instruments. I just wanted to learn how to play the French horn and how to play the euphonium and how to play the trombone. And I never really got good at any of them. I kept sort of just changing constantly between the different instruments. And then I wanted to play the drums in the orchestra. I really just wanted to play the drum kit, but there weren't many songs with that in there. So I had to play the timpanis and crash the cymbals and that type of thing.
But you're obviously encouraged or at least allowed to go and sample these different instruments. My understanding now is you pretty much, once you've picked your instrument, you're focused on that, and that's what you study, and you get kind of narrowed pretty early on in music. Is that right? Is that not right?
I don't know. I'd never actually studied music, even though I play it regularly. But
from your perspective.
Yeah, a lot of my music was before I actually came to Scotch. I'd started doing group music lessons really young, sort of 3 or 4, I think. And learning the piano fairly young as well. And I did that right through primary school at my state school before I came here. And then a little bit alongside my early years in Scotch primary school, I started in year 5 here. So I kind of brought that music with me a little bit, sort of that background in music. And then I kind of just wanted to explore lots of different instruments was the thing that was in my head. And I don't know if that really fit in with what they would have preferred me to do, but I think it helped that I wasn't very good at the trumpet. I couldn't really hit the high notes properly, so that encouraged me to go to some of the other ones, play some trombone and play something that was a little bit easier for my lips.
To try things and to fail regularly is actually a pretty beneficial thing. What do you think music did for you in terms of your education? Like, was it a getaway for you? Did it help with study? Yeah. Did it help with pattern recognition? What do you think it did?
Yeah, I think music's amazing. It's very mathematical and logical, and I think I always grew up with classical music playing at home, and whenever we were driving anywhere, there'd always be classical music in the car, and it was just always on in the background at home. So I kind of had that from a young age, and then when I was 9 or 10, I got into popular music and all that type of thing as well. But I would never have silence. I'd always have music whenever I was doing anything. I'd always have music in the background, and especially when I was studying, I would often have music on. And I've found it helped me concentrate, which sounds a bit counterintuitive, but I think it's quite hard to focus on study and get into the mythical flow state where you're just learning and concentrating 100% on what you're doing. Your mind's always distracted by thoughts and other things and chatter and distractions, and I don't know how the boys do it now with all the electronics. You're trying to study from a computer that is just one big distraction machine. Mm-hmm. So having music kind of takes up sort of interest part of your brain and takes up part of your brain while you can focus on something else. I found it actually helped focus me on study. So my parents weren't so sure that I should keep the music playing while I was studying, but I really found it helpful. And it doesn't matter what type of music, even quite heavy. I was listening to Rage Against the Machine and Metallica quite a lot when I was in high school. And I'd just play it constantly. When I was reading books, I'd have music on.
Because there's that argument that's been made that instrumental music is more conducive to studying, and music that doesn't have any lyrics, for instance, is meant to be more conducive to studying. But it sounds like that wasn't an issue for you.
Yeah, I guess it depends how much you're concentrating on the music and how much you're concentrating on the study. But if it's songs that you know well, then you're probably not going to engage with them intently. You're probably just you're going to hear them in the background and just listen to them without you hear them more than directly listen to them.
I think critiquing the lyrics or
Yeah, or trying to really engage with what the words are. I'm never very good with words in songs. I never really listen to them. I just listen to the melody and the music. So I tend not to. I have to really concentrate to try and work out what the words are in a song. I can never remember the words.
So delving into the learning side of things, would you ever play a certain type of music with certain subjects? Would you make those kind of associations so your memory would somehow be connected to the things you were learning to the music, or is it more of a visual thing?
I never really. I can remember sometimes certain subjects being into a certain type of music at that time, and your brain makes associations with whatever's going on, doesn't it? So, I never really thought I would listen to one song whilst I was learning one subject and help me remember that subject. That's maybe an idea that would work. I don't know, but no, it never really occurred to me. It was just for something that I found maybe a little bit boring that I had to memorize or learn. Having music on, I just found helped me focus on it because it made it more interesting.
And what about playing? I was reading a book by Victor Wooten. He was a bass player. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Very good bass player.
He was talking about how it was important to practice subconsciously as well. So not just conscious practice, like sitting down and trying to get this riff over and over again or this technique, but actually to sit down in front of the TV and just play music without thinking about it. Because I guess to be in a band, you need to be able to listen to what other people are doing at the same time as you're playing. So how did you practice music?
Yeah, so practice is interesting. That was one of my main flaws with music, was that I was not very good at practicing. But what I did like to do was improvise. So I'd sit down at the piano and I would just play for an hour, just different chords and melodies and just make stuff up on the go. And I was always better at improvising than I was at sort of reading music. If anything that was written down on a musical score, I would have to really concentrate to work out what the different notes were, and then I'd have to learn the motor pattern of playing that, and then I'd have to hear what that sounded like, and then once I could hear it in my head, I could play it over and over again. But I had to be able to hear it to play it, which is not how a lot of people play music, but it's just the way. I don't know if it's doing it at such a young age and the way that music was sort of imprinted on my brain, or if it's just something that some people have or don't. I'm kind of not really sure.
Makes sense that to play music, you should be able to listen to it as well. I mean, that's kind of what music is.
Yeah, exactly.
I imagine when you obviously were pretty disciplined with your study to have, worked hard and done well. There must have been some systematic approach you had for all of that. But it's funny because it sounds like that's not necessarily the case for the music, because you were drawn to improvising rather than the sort of laboriousness of the sheet music and all that side of things. How do you, is there a difference between the way you'd approach physics versus music in your attempt to kind of master it, I guess?
Yeah, I certainly did do. When I learnt the building blocks when I was younger, so I learnt the scales on the piano, and I would practice those. I was helped by my parents saying, you need to do your piano practice type thing, when I was young, that was one of the things that I needed to do. And so I think that sort of helped me at that stage. But the older I got, the less I practiced. I lost interest, I guess, a little bit in it when I got to the higher levels of the piano exams, and eventually my music teacher said that I was not allowed to mention that she was my teacher if I wanted to sit the exam. I think that was a clue that maybe my piano playing days were numbered. That's hilarious. But so
she will remain nameless.
June Ashley was her name.
Okay.
She was a very good piano teacher, and she was the one that did those group music lessons as well, and sort of brought that in quite early, I think. I don't know if other people were doing those type of lessons at that time, but that was really like listening to sounds and clapping along to rhythms and dancing around the room and stuff that we did as little kids. I think that was probably more beneficial than just the piano lessons. But so physics, I was thinking about that, of how I actually studied. So physics was a subject where you had to understand concepts rather more so than remember facts, I found. So once I could understand the concept, then I could solve the problems usually. So I would, the way I studied the school subjects is they're fairly finite. Like you can actually study the whole curriculum if you give yourself enough time in I don't know how long I had, a 6 or an 8 week block or something before the mock exams. I set myself the curriculum and I did a timetable, and I split the physics sessions that I gave myself up into the whole curriculum and just worked my way through everything. So it's doable, I think, when you have just 6 subjects and you have just a set amount of stuff that you have to learn. You can actually just plan it out and learn it. And the way I learned was very tactile. I'm a visual learner, and I think writing stuff with a pen really helped me learn as well. I think you need to use your senses. It helps you remember when you use senses, because senses are more interesting. So I think typing notes into a Word document, you might lose a bit of that. It might be harder to remember things. I don't know. I can't learn with screens and computers. I find them really challenging to learn things from. So I would read the textbook and I would make notes that would reference the textbook on a page. And then when I was revising, I would look at those notes and I would try and revise them to more condensed notes that would kind of unlock the first notes that I'd written in my brain. And sort of you've made those neuronal connections once when you're revising things, it is in there, but you need to kind of go over it a few times. So I kind of made things into smaller and smaller keys, I guess, to the knowledge that was in there, was how I would learn at school.
They weren't necessarily mind maps as such, sort of visual images and all that. It was sort of down the page in a linear fashion, but it was words. Conceptual.
Use colours and
I would use colours. So I'd use a pen that had those ones that had green and red and blue and black on the top of them was the main thing.
They were huge in 96.
With the blue bottom and the white top. I don't know if they still make those, but I used to use those, and I would highlight things as well, because I found colours would help me remember how things looked on the page. But I'd sit in the exam and I would be able to visualise the page that I'd written the notes on and where the information was on the page, and that's how it would help me remember it.
So there'd be plenty of memorising in uni as well, I guess, with biology and human anatomy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so the school curriculum that we had, and it's probably quite different now, was very different to what I had to learn at uni. So in medicine, you have to learn a huge amount of facts and sort of a lot of rote learning, like anatomy. You just need to learn all the muscles and their names and where they attach, etc. And I don't feel that the way I learned at school really prepared me for that type of learning, because a lot of it, like I said, with physics, it was concepts and how to solve problems, and there wasn't a huge volume of knowledge to rote learn. I didn't find that some aspects of chemistry were like that. In English literature, we had to learn quotes and phrases and poems and things.
What were the things that you think you needed? Was it a greater independence? Was it better skills and study techniques? What were the things that, like, if you can break that down?
Yeah, so I found uni difficult to learn independently. I think school, we were very mollycoddled, and we were told this is what you need to learn this week. There'll be a test on it at the end of the week. So you had to learn as you went along, and then there'll be regular sort of tests and along the way where you would revise sort of a few weeks worth of work and test at the end of the term. And you kind of didn't have a choice, really. There was a lot of extrinsic reward as well, I think, where you would you would get a good mark in the test and someone says, well done, that's excellent. So you get to uni and the person giving the lecture doesn't really care. Not that of course they care, but they just deliver the lecture and they walk off, and you have to assimilate that knowledge for yourself, and you have to be self-motivated. And if you fall behind, no one's picking you up on it, and you get to the exam at the end of the semester and you have to learn the stuff. So I found it difficult. I found myself really cramming knowledge at uni, and I found it difficult to move to a phase of learning a huge amount of information by heart, which I didn't really have to do so much at school. And I know a lot of areas that we're in an information age now where you can look stuff up in a second, and I think a lot of education is around teaching people how to access knowledge rather than how to learn stuff by heart. But in some professions, you do actually have to memorise a lot of stuff. So, yeah, I don't know how you build that into the curriculum. I'll leave that up to you educators
it's
to
probably
answer that
very
question.
much an individual thing. We try and find out what each individual learner, how they learn. So, if you're a visual learner, then you might try and find strategies for visual learners. I know people, have you ever seen those people that can memorise the whole order of a deck of cards?
Yeah.
They just, like every card they'll associate some sort of visual imagery with, and then before you know it, they can memorise a whole deck of cards. So I guess there are different methods, and there are different people spruiking those kind of methods. How well they work, I don't know.
Yeah, I think people are pretty different. Like you say, people learn in different ways, and I certainly saw with my adult learning at uni and sort of for my specialist exams as well later on, people learn in very different ways, and people have different ways of remembering and the way they write their notes. And some people like cutting and pasting stuff and making this beautiful Word document with pictures like you could publish almost, and other people write scrawly notes on pieces of paper and just rewrite them.
I think probably largely just being invested in it probably helps.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you do, like if you put a little bit of effort there, it's more likely to create some of those connections.
Yeah, I think so. The other thing that I found was difficult is filtering information as well. So you see a medical textbook, it's very, very thick, and you can't learn that amount of detail. You can't learn the book, basically. You need to learn what the key messages are, and you'll have the reading for 1 week might be 100 pages of dense text that you have to distill the key learning points out of. So figuring out how to almost skim read certain sections and focus on important parts and distill that out, I found quite challenging. That's not something I learn at school.
Is there any other way to do that though than just hard graft process? Because I think maybe some students have some kind of way of shortcutting that way to being able to discern what is the important information versus the less important information. But do you think, in your experience, is there any other way other than just you got to just do the hours sitting there, and then over time that discernment starts to, that degree of judgment starts to come?
Yeah, I think finding the right information source is important. So there are different. There was the big textbooks for medicine that we had to learn, and there are kind of summary key facts textbooks that are a lot thinner that kind of have just the core information in them.
Cheat notes.
Yeah, cheat notes almost. And there's also colleagues or seniors that have learnt the information as well that can point you and say, this bit's important, you need to learn this, you need to learn this. So having guidance, I think, is really key as well. But especially in emergency medicine, where we know a little bit about every specialty, you have to know where the line is of what you need to know, and then what is too much and where to stop, and that's quite hard.
It's really the ultimate generalist, right? You, in your role, you have to diagnose problems that just walk in the door, and you have no idea initially what's wrong with them, and you have to diagnose right from basic input. So looking at them, what they say, it must be really difficult.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill that takes a long time to develop, and you need the background knowledge of medicine, of the conditions that they might have, and the different ways in which someone might come in with that condition, to the different ways that things they might say in the story they tell you, or the symptoms that they might have. But then there's this, you over many years you build up this sort of an instinct, and an instinct to pick out someone that's sick is definitely important, but also people present in certain patterns, and they'll give you a certain pattern of information that will link to a condition in your head, and you'll think of the diagnosis that way. So the way we diagnose patients is quite interesting, really, and probably different doctors would work in different ways again, because people have different ways of thinking.
Is that a process that you've come up with? Sorry, is that a process you come up with, or is it something that is taught to you by your institution? Or
I think you pick it up over time, really. I think you have to build up your own level of knowledge. So you need to know about the conditions, but you also need to know about their prevalence in your own population, like how likely each person is to have a certain condition will point you in the right direction. So some things are very common and some things are very rare. So we tend to focus on medical problems that are very serious, even if they're rare, and things that we need to rule out. And then we tend to focus on common conditions and common causes for why a patient might be coming in and focus on them first. Sometimes we are not going to come up with a diagnosis straight away in emergency, and our job may be to rule out serious problems that need immediate attention and then send them for more tests or a bit of time to see what develops with the symptoms. But it's really hard because people are very vague and they haven't read the textbook of how they're supposed to present, and their stories are coloured by their emotions and how they're feeling at the time, and you may have complications of different languages to kind of decipher as well. So it's quite muddy trying to pick out similar to what I was saying before, like pick out the key bits of information from what they tell you. Sometimes it can be hard to really pin down what the real problem is.
Yeah, I've heard they refer to those kind of problems as sort of wicked problems. I recently read this book, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's this psychologist and behavioural economist Daniel Kahneman, who you may have heard of him, talks a lot about cognitive biases, and he talked about how doctors are often, in his view, potentially often suffer from overconfidence in their intuitive decision making, and so therefore, algorithmic things need to be set in place in hospitals to make sure that doctors don't make mistakes, because there's a likelihood that they can.
Was that with specialists or emergency physicians? Do you remember?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what the context of that decision making was in a hospital, but I just thought I'd put that to you, about that challenge to the intuition of a doctor.
Yeah, so I've read most of that book. I found it a bit dense at times, so I even put it in the toilet once to try and get through it a little bit more than I had.
Not in the toilet.
Not in the toilet. Yeah, maybe it's a bit of a brick, but it's a really interesting book, and I love the way he thinks about psychology, particularly, and how humans are imperfect. And our bias is a big issue that we are focused on. An example I'd give was some hospitals put a doctor right at the very front door of the hospital to see people as they come in, just to make things happen a bit quicker. Say, you're obviously going to need a CT scan, or you're going to need some blood tests. I'm going to order those for you, and then you can go in and see the other doctor who will pick up your story and take it from there. And so they're not while they're in the waiting room. That's not wasted time. So that's a time-saving idea. The problem with that is that they cut corners. They're not taking a proper story from the patient. They're not properly examining the patient, and they make assumptions that then say I'm a senior doctor and I see the patient out the front, and then a junior doctor inside picks them up. They're going to say, I'm not going to go against what the consultant thought out the front, and go down the wrong path. So they'll have what's called premature diagnostic closure, where they'll say, it's obviously this condition. They won't think widely enough. So that's a definite trap that people can fall into.
Right. It's kind of narrowing right at the point of the patient coming in.
Yeah. I haven't unpicked intuition exactly, but it is an important part of the diagnostic process. I don't know if it's as mysterious as people think it is, though. It's kind of pattern recognition, really, and people may not acknowledge that that's what it is, but it really is seeing people come to a hospital looking a certain way over a period of time, punctuated by significant cases that you may have seen that will, when you see that pattern again, you get that recognition in your brain because those connections have been made before, and it will make you think of that diagnosis again. So that's kind of intuition, and I think that's partly just how the brain works. Whether that's helpful or unhelpful, I think it's mostly helpful in medicine. We try and use decision rules. This is drifting fairly far from education theory, I know, but we try and use decision rules to help us decide if patients need certain tests. Like there's decision rules if people have a neck injury as to whether we need to get a CT scan of their neck or not. And if people meet certain criteria, then you can take the collar off and say it's not broken. The chance of you having an injury is really, really low, and we don't need to investigate it any further. So we use those decision rules in that fashion to try and save people from having unnecessary tests. But there's decision rules we've made for a different condition called pulmonary embolism, which is a blood clot in your lungs. And there's several different ones, and all of them have, as the most important part of the decision rule is, as the doctor, do you think the most likely diagnosis is a pulmonary embolism? So intuition is actually built into this algorithmic decision rule. So it's interesting. I think medicine certainly hasn't moved to the algorithmic diagnostic approach just yet. I think if you followed that approach, you would probably miss some people with some rare conditions, because you would focus on common things and probabilities. And I think it's probably going to be the future of medicine, and diagnostics is going to be more and more computer aided, I think. But it would have to be fairly advanced with machine learning and learning the specific population that comes into your specific hospital in your specific city and what conditions they're likely to have. I think it would have to be quite advanced to really be effective.
What percentage come through the door that are really tricky, things that you don't know what's going on?
I always say the trickiest patients are the ones that don't get the high triage category. So we give people a score from 1 to 5 when they come to the door, whereas a triage 1 needs immediate resuscitation, and a triage 5's got a stub toe or wants a form filled in or something. And the trickiest ones are often the category 4 patients, where they're not immediately needing medical attention, but they're a complex puzzle that you have to figure out and try and work out what's wrong with them, and sort of pierce through all the layers of stress and social problems and what they tell you and what their examination is, and
is that
try
a
and
pretty
figure things
exciting
out.
part of your job? Is that?
I find it the most exciting. Yeah, I find diagnosis the biggest challenge and the most rewarding when you can solve a puzzle. I think
a lot of people say problem solving is really the most exciting part of their career or their lives.
Yeah, it's quite satisfying to solve a problem, and even it sounds bad, but even if someone's got a terrible condition, if you can diagnose that condition correctly and get the right treatment started, it's still satisfying intellectually, even though it's sad that someone may have something bad going on with them, it's still satisfying. So I think a lot of us get satisfaction from that side of the job. It is the few % of patients that come in critically unwell each day are really exciting, obviously, and we enjoy managing a complex team, a big team around a complex patient in that way as well. That's quite satisfying.
Collaboration must be vital under those circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. We have almost a military format where there's a leader that stands at the foot of the bed and doesn't do any medicine and directs all the other people to do things in order, and that's the best way it works. If too many people start doing their own thing, it doesn't really work. Yeah, so that's also satisfying, but I think diagnosis.
There's also something a little algorithmic about that, isn't there? The person stands at the end of the bed and directs people in a particular, very particular framework, I guess.
So what happens when you're stressed, which we always are when there's a sick patient there, is it's very hard to think clearly and logically. That part of your brain sort of gets misted over a little bit. So we almost anchor ourselves in these algorithms and ways to approach the patient that might be sick in a way that you don't really understand yet. You just start at airway and you work your way through all of our different orders of the way you approach a sick patient, and that way you kind of have something to anchor yourself to, and then once you start to figure out what's going on or gain control of the situation, you can relax and think a bit more clearly.
Talking about stress, I would think of your job as horribly stressful, and if I don't get 6 hours sleep a night, I'm a horrible person. And so, but you'd be doing shift work, does it take a certain type of person to do what you do?
It's funny. I don't find the medicine side of things as stressful as you might think. I find things stressful in my job that you would probably find stressful in your job.
But did you know that you could deal with the kind of things that you'd be seeing. I can't imagine you would have been exposed to the same amount of bodily fluids that you'd be seeing now at high school when you were making a decision to be a doctor. How did you know you were going to be able to deal with that?
I guess you don't really know. And I always thought that it was something that I wouldn't mind so much seeing gore and bodily fluids, as you put it. I never thought that doesn't particularly gross me out personally. But yeah, the human side of things is really hard. So when we're doing a resuscitation of someone that's actually their heart stopped, and we're trying to work on them, and the prospects after someone's heart's been stopped for about sort of 10-20 minutes is pretty remote that we're going to be able to resuscitate them. So we kind of work our way through our systems, and then eventually if we have to stop, we have to stop. But then when I walk down the corridor to open the door to talk to that person's relatives, that is really, really hard, because then all of a sudden it's not a job and an algorithm and doing what you do. It's a human, and then it rehumanizes it again. So
do you take that home with you?
I try not to. It must affect me somehow. I think some of the really sad things I've seen, I've never forgotten. Sort of some people's reactions to the news that we've given them. I've found that really, really tough. So yeah, I don't know what that does to me really. I do talk about it with my wonderful wife when I need sort of to debrief things, and colleagues as well at work. But yeah, sometimes that's just a really sad situation. There's nothing much you can really do.
Do you think if we were to ask all your best friends, would they all say that you're someone who you've always been someone who deals with stress pretty well? Like you've always had a calm, composed approach to things? Because I've heard this about a number of ER doctors that I've come across.
I'd say, Sam, you probably couldn't be an ER doctor.
I'd be the worst person at it. Absolute worst person.
Yeah, I am a pretty calm person, and I think that would be a common characteristic is someone that remains calm under pressure. I think that's important. Yeah. I might be a bit like a duck swimming sometimes. Might be calm on the outside, but
right.
Yeah, I can usually project at least some calm, even if I'm not internally calm.
All right.
You're studying your PhD at the moment on illicit drug use.
Yeah, that's right.
Can you break that down for us?
So from about maybe 6 or 7 years ago, a whole lot of new drugs started appearing, and these were kind of copies of or similar drugs to the illicit drugs that we already have that have been slightly modified, or different chemical structures to kind of get around the law. And so people could initially illegally import these drugs and take them.
I remember
without breaking the law.
Kids were jumping out windows and things like that.
Yeah, so the biggest ones in Perth were the synthetic cannabis drugs. There was a drug called Chronic, and there was a few different variants of that, which is a drug that's supposed to mimic cannabis, and it was sprayed as a chemical that was sprayed onto leaves, supposed to look similarly, but a lot of the drugs had totally different effects. Like people would have seizures and people would go crazy, like you said, and some people unfortunately died. And it became apparent we didn't know much about these drugs. And so there's a whole lot of stimulants that are similar to amphetamine and ecstasy, but again, some people can go really, really loopy and become extremely unwell, overheat, have seizures. And there was a whole lot of deaths at music festivals sort of over 2016, 2017, and clusters of really sick people in Melbourne and the Gold Coast that were taking these unknown drugs. They often called them zombie drugs and flakka and things like that. So I was quite interested in what these drugs actually were and what they did and what the harms were, and felt there was a bit of a void in our knowledge in that area. As emergency doctors, we need to know what these drugs do to be able to treat them.
It's a good topic to have for your PhD when you see those voids. Who were we talking about that with the other day? When you see a hole in the research, then it's a good time to be
choosing your PhD?
Yeah, I think the idea of a PhD is it's going to add to the body of knowledge somehow, in some way. It may be a very, very small area that people tend to focus on. So yeah, my project is fairly simple. It's a collaboration with multiple other doctors at Royal Perth and the scientists at Chem Centre WA who are doing the analysis of the blood samples that we're sending as well. Basically, we've got over 600 patients in the study with blood tests which give us a readout of exactly what drugs are in their system and what the concentrations were. So I'm at the analysis phase of that at the moment, which is probably a few years of work to go still, but I think it's going to be really interesting. We've got some clusters of some quite interesting drugs that we don't really know a lot about. So I think it will be, it will add to the knowledge.
Are those area. Unknown drugs, are they growing in number? Or did they is there a fixed set that stuck around for the last few years now?
No, they change all the time, and they pop up and then they disappear, and then other ones pop up and disappear. WA had a really good law coming in, I think it was 2015, which banned all psychoactive substances. Rather than trying to ban each little chemical, they just banned anything that's psychoactive. It's now illegal to sell a substance, to possess it, to even to sell something that is just a bag of salt and pretend it's a psychoactive substance is also an offence. So it doesn't really matter what it is. If it's a drug that's harmful, they can still get you. So and they shut down a whole lot of shops that were selling these previously legal drugs and raided them all and got rid of them all. And we've seen a lot less since then, but definitely they're still around. The main problem is still methamphetamine in WA, and it's still a huge problem. Although COVID has actually helped, there's the supply's gone down a little bit, so we're definitely seeing a lot less of that at the moment with all the border closures and travel restrictions and everything.
Yeah, we have been chatting about a few of the silver linings of COVID, and that actually wasn't one that we discussed. We talked about how it's impacted families a little bit and bringing back to the simple life a little bit. How's your family been throughout this period? Yeah,
we really bonded. I think it helped us actually bond with each other. The kids, I've got a 7-year-old, 6-year-old and a nearly 2-year-old. And the two big kids really got on like a house on fire. They were creating things in the backyard and making these intricate cubbies and getting bricks and making stuff out of bricks and wood, and they pulled all the cushions off everything and made this huge, got every blanket in the house. They're just creating together a lot at home, and they really, really loved it. So I think that was quite nice. They definitely fought less.
And I imagine your family life could have changed drastically further had this gotten a lot worse than what it got to, or currently what it's at. Were you making any kind of plans for what would happen if things got really bad, like it has in Italy or Spain?
You mean with work? Yeah, we our shed is now ready to be lived in case I needed to go into isolation if I'd caught COVID. There's a bed in there, and we've kind of painted the walls, and it's ready to go if necessary. So that was one thing that we did just early on, so I would have a safe place if necessary. But we really have dodged the bullet, I think, in Perth through excellent public health measures. We have very, very few cases left now. So it's just going to be a matter of managing the trickle of cases that are going to come in with people coming into the country from quarantine, etc. I think we'll still have the odd case pop up, but it's the community spread seems to have been completely eliminated.
Yeah, we're definitely living in a lucky part of the world.
Yeah, we actually we talk about it at work. A lot of us have survivor's guilt, where we were ready to go into battle and really steeling ourselves and quite stressed in the lead up as we were trying to reorganise everything that we did. And a lot of it has been not unnecessary, but we've just waited for this wave of patients that has never come. So we're very, very grateful for that. But
you've worked in Europe because we didn't actually talk about you speaking French, but that's one more addition to one of the things you're capable of doing. But working over in France, you probably had some colleagues
still working in Europe. Have you spoken to them about what it's been like?
It's been a bit long. I haven't really kept in contact with the doctors I work with over there. But yeah, France has been very badly hit by coronavirus. So yeah, I imagine it would be pretty horrific. We see reports from doctors in Europe and America constantly, and where we hear webinars and podcasts and on Facebook groups where they're discussing management and things, and it sounds just absolutely horrendous. Like the doctors are trying to string oxygen tubing up around corridors on ladders just to try and get oxygen to patients that can't even get into a bed, and it's just horrible. So we're very glad that we haven't had to face that here. I think we're probably in the luckiest city in the world at the moment, just about, for coronavirus.
I'm really interested in the ethics of the decision making that doctors have been faced with in places like Italy and France and all over the world, where they've been inundated with so many patients, and then they've had to kind of determine who can go into the breathing apparatus,
go on a ventilator.
Go on the ventilators.
Yeah.
Did you as a team talk through that quite a lot, or where did you look for guidance on what would have to happen in the event of these really tricky situations?
Yeah, so the way we planned that was that we would have a team approach. So we would have the emergency doctor looking after the patient, the intensive care doctor and the respiratory doctor all come to the bedside with the patient and have a discussion about what the management was going to be. So that way it's kind of, it brings in all the different levels of expertise. The ICU doctors know what it's going to be like for that patient in intensive care and what their prospects of coming through the illness are, and the respiratory doctors are the experts in lung diseases, and the emergency doctor's the one initially caring for the patient who may have spoken to the patient and family and needs to kind of guide the initial care. So we would come together and just discuss each patient on their merits, and it would be a bit of a moving feast if we were going to run out of equipment at any stage. Then some difficult decisions would have to be made, but we didn't kind of prescribe age cutoffs or anything like that. It's definitely an ethical minefield, but I think with each decision that you make, you have to make the best decision at that time with what
Can't
resources you have available.
how you're going to respond, basically.
Yeah, and you're trying to, a lot of what I didn't say about diagnosis before, but a lot of medicine is probabilities rather than certainties. Patients often want yes or no answers about things, and it's very grey. So you have to take into account the probability of them coming through and the probability of them surviving ICU, for example, and use that as part of your decision making. And it is very difficult. We do have to make those decisions normally as well with patients that are becoming unwell, and you have to make difficult decisions about what your goals of care are with the patient and what may be the limits of the care that you might offer. And certainly people with a poor quality of life, we have to really think carefully about if we're doing them harm by trying to do too much, and if we're respecting their wishes and the family's wishes. And so we're used to having those conversations with patients and family. That's something we do every day. But I think it would really, really hurt to have a patient where you would think that they would, say, come through if you give a certain treatment and you don't have enough, or you're not able to offer them that because of limitations. That would be really hard. So we've not faced that in WA at all, really. With any patient that's needed care, we've been able to give it to them, which is really down to the public health measures. If you ever want to see how well public health works, this is just the perfect example. People want a cure for everything, but really prevention is the best cure for everything.
Sam will have some. Are we ready for our final questions? Or did you have anything else before the final questions?
I just recently read this book called From Good to Great by this guy, Jim Collins from Stanford, who talks about if the one skill he reckons is most important for students to learn is probabilistic thinking, good probabilistic thinking. If kids can leave high school with that skill set, that he says that will, take them wherever they need to go. Yeah. If you could think back and think what skills are most important from school, what would they be? You've sort of answered this to some extent already, but
Yeah, I think you do need to learn how you learn, I think, and you need to learn. It depends what area you want to go into. Obviously, I've done medicine and I'm talking about things that are relevant to medicine, but I think people that do other professions and trades and things, there will be a totally different skill set that they will need. So it's kind of dependent on the area you want to go into. But yeah, I think you need to learn how you learn as a, whether you're a visual learner or whether you, or the other types of learners, I'm not sure what they are, but yeah.
You don't need to know.
I don't need to know, yeah. Yeah, you need to learn how to learn. And I think that I'd kind of discovered some of that at uni where I maybe at school, it would have been helpful to know how I learn. I don't think I had that metacognition of how things work for me. I just kind of started learning a certain way, and we didn't really get taught back in the day of how to study. I think now that study skills are taught at school, aren't they? Like how to plan your study diary and your calendar and all that type of thing. We didn't really get a lot of guidance in that, and it was very individual. So I think that's important. I gained a lot, kind of what you were saying at the start, from being able to do lots of different things here. So I think music's been a very important part of my life, and staying fit's always been important to me as well. And I think that at a school like Scotch, where you've got those opportunities, is really important. Critical thinking is important. Learning not to trust all the information that you have. I think that's more a problem for today than yesterday in terms of Facebook and fake news and all of, not everything that you get told is true, and there's people spouting misinformation everywhere. So I think not being cynical is probably taking a bit too far, but questioning, asking lots of questions, I think is important as well.
But the 5G thing causing coronavirus that's definitely true, surely.
Oh, I couldn't believe there was a protest of anti-vaxxers and anti-5G people and anti-lockdown people all came together, and I think there is a common theme there. Maybe a lack of critical thinking.
Yeah. I think when they got chatting, there was a few heads being scratched, maybe.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful not to judge people as being stupid as well. Like, I don't think people that think differently to me are stupid. It may be that they just don't have access to the information or education that I've had. So I think in America, a lot of people are just uneducated. It doesn't make them bad people, but they just don't really get it because they've not been taught properly or not been exposed to the correct way of learning. So, yeah.
Our previous guest talked about having he thought it was really important to learn how to have a moral vocabulary, essentially like teaching kids to understand ethics so they could sort of have a moral discernment. Where did you learn your moral vocabulary and did you learn a lot of it in a more nuanced way as you became a doctor or prior to that, or how do you see that?
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that. I think it's a combination really of the way I was brought up and modelling from my parents and people that were mentors through school and the way they interacted. I don't remember us having a lot of teaching in that area, sort of ethics and philosophy. We did have religious education where we would go through some of those things. And in year 12, we had a extracurricular thing called Prometheans. Do they still do that? Where we met up with girls from St Hilda's and we would discuss ethical dilemmas and things like that once a week for a term, something like that. So yeah, that was quite a nice thing.
We've got a philosophy course now. That's probably about as close as we have to that.
Yeah.
Promethean sounds way cooler.
My
course.
Why'd they get rid of that?
I don't know. Yeah, it was very enjoyable. It's always nice when you've not seen many girls at school to see some when you're getting towards year 12. Meet at least a few. Yeah, that was handy.
Well, we've got some final questions for you. Now, you talked about being able to separate different parts of your brain there. Do you reckon you could noodle over your nice-looking strat there while Sam asks you a few final questions?
Like a bit of a party trick type thing?
Yeah.
I can try.
All right.
As long as you can promise to edit out anything that sounds really badly.
Yeah. And
and see how we go. Are you taking requests? Metallica?
Yeah, Metallica.
Rage Against the Machine? Something you played in 96.
Something I played in 96.
Oh, a big song in 96. Yeah, as you were year 12 studying for your exams. Was there...
What did I play back then? I don't know. Yeah, I was certainly liked Metallica. I was starting to get a bit sick of by then. I was moving into a bit of jazz music, and
I don't want to hear any of that.
You don't want to hear that, do you? I don't know. Just pick a song and I'll play it.
You pick one.
Metallica, For Whom the Bell Tolls.
How does that go?
Or some cheesy 90s stuff.
What's that? 90210. What was that? That's how it goes.
All right, Sam.
Something like that.
All right.
If I have to think too much, I won't be able to. Maybe Led Zeppelin remasters.
All right. Tick.
Is that acceptable?
Yep. Here's another one for you. What distracts you?
What distracts me?
Yeah.
My own thoughts. The internet. My mobile phone would be the worst. I just find mobile phones so distracting, and as you know, I actually went to a dumb phone for a whole year just to try and stop
A Nokia.
looking at my phone constantly.
Yeah.
And you know, every downtime when you can sort of process information and think, to staring at a phone, getting more information overload to your brain. Just
that's incredible things, aren't they?
I don't like screens much. I find them really destructive.
Yeah.
I think they're the worst thing, the best and worst thing humans have ever come up with.
Yeah.
Just any type. Like TV, when you can just click on one channel and just watch what it delivers to you.
Yeah, I'd like those
But
days.
choosing your own stuff out of Netflix and
yes, I think
iView is terrible.
too many options is really bad for us. We should only have a couple.
It's stressful.
Last couple of questions.
What book most transformed your life?
That's really tricky. Transformative book's kind of like a self-help book or something, or like really, really devout.
From your English lit class, or
English lit. Heart of Darkness was just fantastic.
Conrad. Yep.
It's really short, which was always good, but just very profound, and every word was important. So I loved Heart of Darkness. Not so much all of the other English lit books, unfortunately, but that one was really good.
Actually, I wanted to ask you this other question. What belief or habit have you formed in the last 5 years that has been of most benefit to you?
Belief or a habit? Habit that's been most helpful has been riding to work, because it's incidental exercise, and you can just it takes no time out of your day. It takes the same time as driving, but I just get all the benefits of exercising for an hour and a half every day. So that's been really, really helpful for me. It's really hard to find time to exercise when you've got young kids. So I find riding really, that's probably the best habit I've picked up in the last couple of years, about the last 3 or 4 years.
Great. And the guitar, that's a nice little habit to maintain.
Yeah. So I didn't play guitar for about 15 years, probably.
Really?
Yeah, I almost never picked it up. And I think that was part of just getting immersed in study and work at uni. And I've only really picked it up again the last, say, 5 years. And I really miss it. I didn't realise how much I missed it until I was doing it again. But it's something I used to play guitar just all the time when I was at uni and when I was in school. But you'd get focused on different things. Medicine can be consuming sometimes.
I bet, yeah. Oh, well, we're glad you're picking up the guitar again. Thanks for coming in, Dave. It's been a pleasure. Learned a lot.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dave. It's been great.
Yeah, nice to have a chat.